So based on what I've seen on this head, this freeze plug's coming out. Look at that corrosion already in there. Okay. I'm here with a Jeep 4.0 cylinder head. This cylinder head is cast from iron, and the way that's done is molten iron is poured into a mold and sand fixture, allowed to cool. Then you remove this shape from the fixture, and then you need to get all the sand out of it. What the sand does is creates the different passages and shapes and bosses and openings in this head. To get the sand out, there's many openings, and once the sand's out, those openings need to be filled in. And that's what I'm going to go over today. How we fill in this hole. On all the Jeep 4.0 engine heads, 2686, 7120, 0630, and 0331, this opening is approximately 2 inches. That measurement 1.995. All right, when we close this hole with a core plug, we want it to be a little bit bigger than this opening. Where these two meet, and this is a little bigger, that measurement is called an interference fit. And a nominal interference fit is 15 ten-thousandths. So when I say nominal, you can go higher for a good interference fit, or you could go lower. You still have a reasonable interference fit. All right, here's a set of feeler gauges. Right there's 15 ten-thousandths, 0.0015. That's the smallest one in this set. All right, this is a 2-inch opening, but every casting is going to be a little different. So what I'm going to do is take 5 measurements of this, and we'll write them all down. We'll throw out the highest and the lowest, and then get an average. .992. Make sure it's 0 each time. .997. Make sure it's 0. .965. Zero it. .981. .9985. Let's take one more because that 1.96 just doesn't seem right. .986. Okay, so we'll throw out the lowest one. That's right here. And the highest one is 1.997. And there's 2 measurements of that. Or no, here, yep, that is it. Nope, it's this one, 1.9985. Okay, after doing that math, 1.990 is our opening right there. That's pretty damn close to 2 inches, isn't it? All right, so 0 10,000ths makes this really easy math-wise. We're just going to add 15 10,000ths here. So to close our opening in this particular head, that core plug needs to measure 1.9915. Okay, I have my measuring tool set at 1.9915. Now let's swap it over to millimeters. .59 millimeters. Okay, we got our measurements. We took measurements here and got an average, and we determined that this opening is 1.990. We added a nominal interference fit of 15 10,000ths, and we came to the answer that 1.9915 is a good interference fit for our opening. We then changed that value in inches to metric, and 50.59 would be a good interference fit for this opening. If I go down to the auto parts store and tell them that I want a core plug for a Jeep 4.0, they're going to sell me a Dorman brand 555-069-R. Let's measure this one. .0055. That will definitely be a good interference fit for this opening. I'm not a big fan of Dorman. I'm just not. So the brand I'm going to go with is Melling. To me, Melling's a very reliable manufacturer of engine parts. So we're going to look in this catalog for the closest expansion/freeze plugs that'll match up with our numbers of our head. And while we're talking about this, you see Melling calls these expansion/freeze plugs. I've been calling them core plugs. It's an argument you're not going to win. So up here is interesting. Here's some threaded core plugs. And obviously, water expansion is not going to pop out a threaded plug, is it? And on our Jeep head, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 threaded core plugs. And these openings are to get the sand out of this casting when the molten iron cools. When you go to the auto parts store, just ask for a freeze plug or the guy's not going to know what the hell you're talking about. Alright, so we need a 1.9915. And that's real close to a 2, isn't it? So here's all the Melling part numbers for a 2-inch. And if we wanted to be on the high side, we might go with a 2.164. Let's look at our metric. The closest one to 50.59 is this 51 millimeter. And there's our part number, MPC 374. Also on our Melling chart, for a 2-inch plug, we have a deep cup plug. And this is an example of a deep cup plug. Here's a shallow cup plug. All right. So here's a Melling 2-inch shallow cup. PS 165. In this chart, it's MPS 165. And here's our 51 millimeter. MPC 374. When you get that one, it just says 51 millimeter on it. So let's take a look at the measurements on our milling. And remember, we need to be 1.9915 or 50.59 to have a good interference fit. But we want to be a little bit on the higher side of this. This is a water jacket and there is some pressure in there. So let's look at our 2-inch. .012. So that's well on the high side of 15 ten-thousandths. And our 51 millimeter .011. Either one of these is going to be a good fit. To get my hands on a 51 millimeter milling freeze plug / expansion plug, I had to buy a whole box of them. Okay, let's clean up this hole and get it ready for our freeze plug, core plug, expansion plug. Right here's where the cast iron was poured and 2 molds came together. So right here I got a nice little lip that could actually cut somebody's finger. Probably be a good idea to grind that down. And it looks like the last guy used RTV black on this. Okay, so I'm going to use one of my 51 millimeters. And here at ambient temperature, that's 2.009 inches, which will be a good interference fit on the high side of our opening, which is 1.99. And I have 2 of these in the freezer. And that's because I'll probably screw the first one up. So let's write this down. 2.0095. And we'll see what it measures coming out of the freezer. 2.008. 1/10,000th smaller. Let's get ready before we bring that out. Okay, when we drive this in, we want this edge to be a nice concentric ring around the cast iron. You don't want to drive it in too far. And we also want that edge to be below that little bevel right there. So there is a little bit of finesse to this. And I'm going to use some gasket shellac compound in here. I have probably had this for at least 25 years. And it never hardens up. All right, here's my 51 millimeter out of the freezer. Okay. Okay, a little bit of metal. So okay, with this 51 millimeter Melling coming out of the freezer, we did have a little bit of metal loss from our plug. So the interference fit on this is a little bit tight. It was 2.009 and then 2.008 out of the freezer. All right, with that Melling 51 millimeter out of the freezer, .018 interference fit and a nominal is 15 10,000ths. So that certainly is on the higher side of an interference fit. Let's see what this Dorman would have been. .005, and a Melling 2-inch would have been .01. Okay, we're not going to worry about that little bit of metal we lost. We'll call that good. All right, my installation is the lip of the plug is right below the chamfer in the iron casting. So my critique of my work is that's a good installation. I lost a little bit of metal, but it was minuscule. I'm pretty happy with what transpired. All right, in this Melling engine parts expansion freeze plug guide, you can get whole kits for the 4.0. Make sure you look through the list. And to get this plug, of course, you'd want to get a 2-inch or a 51 millimeter. Some of the kits you just blindly buy on Amazon come with some sizes that are not going to drive in. Okay? I bought a kit for, it was pretty reasonable in price, and it had a 2 and 8/64 freeze plug, expansion plug, core plug that's supposed to fit in this head. If an interference fit nominal is 15 10,000ths, you're never going to drive this in. Okay, you have deep cup and then you have regular cup. And supposedly the deep cup is easier to drive in. You get more surface area for sealing between the cup and your cast iron. And then there's also the option to get a brass plug. I'm going to stick with what Chrysler used, but brass is available. All right, here is a Clearwater aftermarket cylinder head for the 4.0. Clearwater uses a deep well cup. This is a deep well out of a remanufactured head. These little discs here are basically a meltable metal. So perhaps a solder, a lead. But if this head overheats, this is going to melt. The manufacturer is going to know that it wasn't their product that failed. And the companies and machine shops that remanufactures heads and sells them, they're going to know that their product had an overheat. So that's what these are. All right, well, I got this apart. Let's cover the water flow through this head real quick. All these openings are blocked, except each cylinder has this little passage. And back here behind number 6 is your main opening for water flow under pressure that comes up out of the block and enters the head. The best way to explain this that I can think of is if you had a bunch of water sprinklers set up. This one's going to have a higher pressure, but the one down at the end isn't going to have the same pressure. The water pressure is going to flow to the least resistance. So all these little holes in here, these are just holes to remove the sand when the cast iron is complete. So where I'm going with this is all the water, or the majority of the water, is coming up through these 2 holes. If this plug fails, that's going to be your path of least resistance. And this head is most likely going to fail. So this one did not fail like that. It was paper thin. To get it out was quite a chore. Here's one that's a better example. When this failed, it just corroded through on that little hole right there. This hole is where I drove it out with a tool. So once the water jacket is breached like that, this thing's going to overheat really quick. So here's a deep well out of a remanufactured head. As you can see, it's starting to corrode. If you're going to use the product that is sold to flush out the coolant system, make sure you follow the instructions 100%. That product's made to corrode and remove buildup inside your cooling system. Anything that's left is going to act against the metal that you don't want to clean up. All right. Water under pressure enters this head through a passage in the engine block, comes up through these 2 holes and travels down toward the thermostat. A small portion does come up through each cylinder, through these holes. But the majority is coming up right here. Now with this screwdriver, you see that? If this fails on you, this is going to just dump water real quick out this hole, and you're going to have cracks. That's what happened to this head. This was a very reliable, durable head, but the failure of this plug essentially killed this head. So if the water's flowing through here, through the head, which cylinders are probably going to fail? The ones farthest from the breech. Cylinders 1 and 2, and that's exactly what happened here. Here's a crack in number 1. Here's the crack in number 2. Also, this is cracked out to here. erosion on the intake valve happened because these cracks caused a misfire in this cylinder, and this cylinder has a, see this divot there? If we pull this exhaust valve, the integral valve seat is also burned on this. Okay, the location of the Jeep 4.0 head core plug, and we're talking about all of the different castings, 2686, the 7120, the 0630, and the 0331. This plug is impossible to change with the head attached to the engine and it installed in the engine bay. Now I'm sure there's somebody out there that has changed it in situ, and good on you. But what I'm getting at, most likely you're going to have to pull the head. But you can get some JB weld and fill in the hole as a temporary fix to get you home or get you to work. When this one failed, it was a paper thin little hole. You couldn't even see it. So some JB weld would be a solution as a temporary fix. All right. That's it.